It's time for us to get to our first segment here, self-publishing tips from the trenches. In this segment, we share with you some essential indie author tips or tips for any author, whether you're an indie or even if you're traditionally published. These should be helpful tips on writing, but also the self-publishing side of things. Here at BookFunnel, the author support team, Emma, Kelly, and myself, we all happen to be indie authors. And so we also help authors on a day-to-day basis with not only using BookFunnel, but just navigating the tools in the indie author sphere that are out there. So we have a lot to say. Emma, you were going to go first today. What's your tip? What do you got for us?
Okay, it may seem kind of random, but work with me. And it came to me in a fit of exasperation. But you know how when someone recommends a book on craft or marketing and you go to Amazon and there's that banner that says you bought this book 3 years ago and you're like, okay. And then you go to your Kindle library and sure enough, it's there. Well, the other day I got so fed up with that I went into my Kindle library and organized all of my writing books by topic. Voice, dialogue, this is on self-editing, and I discovered I have 6 books on writing fight scenes, and I still keep trying to buy more, but the new rule is that the toddler will check her library first.
This is amazing.
I like it. But hey, if you got to get around to reading those books at some point. That's a good tip.
Someday,
I think there's plenty of
right?
authors out there that would apply to.
Maybe the toddler has to read one of the books before it gets to buy a new one.
Right. Yes, right. Now, when you buy a book on craft or something, do you I don't know what your process is. Are you taking notes, or is it usually something directly relevant to what you're currently writing, or is it more generic?
Usually because there's a point in the craft that I wanted to dive in more when I'm during my editing process, and I'll go look on Amazon and find something that looks like it's talking about what I need.
Okay, so mine today is a BookFunnel helpful tip about formatting. One of the things that we see come through the queue quite a bit will be an author saying, I put my book on my Kindle device and there's no cover. You know, why? I put it up in BookFunnel, it's there. Why aren't you putting my cover onto my device? And we need to talk about embedded covers. Embedding your cover is in your formatting software, whatever formatting software you're using, if it's Vellum or Atticus, whatever. If you are when you create your file, you need to make sure that cover is embedded in the file itself, because that is what shows when it transfers over to Apple Books or Kindle or whatever it is. The cover that you put into BookFunnel is for our landing pages. So if you change your cover, which happens all the time, we'll have a reader go, I got a different book than I was expecting. Because what's happening is on the inside of the cover is the old cover, it stays because it's still in the file. So if you change your cover, you have to change your cover in both places, both on the BookFunnel, in BookFunnel, and then actually within the files. So we get that a lot, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to bring it up because that's a big one.
That's a good one. And the readers are there have been times, sometimes an author will update a cover and readers will be confused because it's a totally different looking cover, even though it's the same title. But there have been times where the embedded cover is a completely different book, where it looks like the author may have duplicated the book file to create a new project and left that embedded cover from the old one or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's what happens is you can duplicate it so that all your back matter and your front matter are all similar, and you just make those changes, and they don't always see, especially at Vellum. You actually have to go to a specific place in Vellum to see your embedded cover.
It's in a separate
and if
spot.
you're not thinking about it, you might just leave your old cover in there.
And this has implications outside of BookFunnel too, because if you have that file embedded and then you upload that to Amazon, the same sort of thing is going to, at least in the interior content of the book, is going to potentially happen. Well, no, that's
that's how what's going to populate in your library.
Yep. So my tip for today is around plotting and outlining. When you are plotting a story, the idea is that you can reduce all of the events and the plot points down into sentences where plot event happens because of, or but plot event happens, right? And so what you want is to be this event happens and therefore this happens, or this event happened, but this also happened, or this complicated things. What you don't want to have is this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. Because those events now they're not connected. So I think beginners make a mistake when they're plotting or writing an outline for their book is, well, this thing is going to happen, and then this thing is going to happen, and then this thing is going to happen. No, you have to go back and say, okay, this happens because this happened. And if you can't connect those two things, and you have work to do, at least hopefully you're at the outlining stage. Hopefully it's not like your first draft and you're realizing that there's a massive hole and you have these plot elements that aren't connected to anything and they're just hanging there in the open, right? So that's my tip. And I can't claim credit for this one. This one has been out there, but it's something I recently stumbled upon. And I think that just makes the whole outlining and plotting can be a very daunting process too, especially for somebody who's a pantser and you're just used to just kind of going without much of an outline. I think if you can at least connect the plot points and the events in a causal fashion, so cause and effect, the A causes B, I think you're setting yourself up for more success there when you're actually telling the story, because all the stuff that happens will not only logically make sense, but it's going to be connected. There's going to be like the reason why the final confrontation happens at the end is very clear. You could walk it back to the very beginning, and that's not only logical, it's satisfying. So there's my tip for today.
I think that's such a great tip because I think it will help avoid the problem I see. I think especially in movie and TV writing, probably mostly in series TV writing, is that they get addicted to the plot and then force their characters into it, instead of having the characters drive the action. I have actually never heard specifically talking about make sure you have a causal plot outline, but I think that'll help when you're then writing it to help the characters drive the action instead of the other way around.
I tend to be, to kind of go back here a little bit, my editor had given some feedback because there was a project I was working on with Damon, the founder of BookFunnel. We co-wrote some books together at one point in time. And we got feedback from our editor on it. And what he said was that Jack is really good at world building and like the logic behind things. Damon is really good at like the story. And it was one of those times where like your parents tell you, that, oh, your brother's better at that than you are. And you have to take a moment to not just take offense to it and be like, okay, let me take that and internalize like what I need to do to get better, and realizing that, yes, I can think logically about a world like, oh, well, there's no gravity, so it wouldn't make sense for them to do this. Like that makes sense to me. But the story elements I usually try to tie them together logically. The problem is when you just use logic, the plot can sometimes lack a little bit of like feeling, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
This tip, when I heard about this, like, okay, the logical part of my brain latches onto that and really likes it, but then I see how that creates the emotional satisfaction that I was looking to create. So that's why I think I latched onto it, because it already jived with my personality, and it's getting me that result that that way I can live up to my editor's hopes for me.
Hopes and dreams.
Yeah, yes,
dreams.
yes.
I have a tip as well.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
have some tips. I'm the guy at Written Well who looks over all the business charts because I'm a nerd. So I've been tracking, I track all the genres and everything. And so I just wanted to talk about, my 3 tips are 3 genres that I think are both doing very well right now, or really good genres. If we're talking about writing to market later, it'll be good too. So the big one right now is actually dark fantasy romance. I mean, it's well known already that romance makes all the money in self-publishing. Yeah. Think something, when you run the numbers, it's been a while since I did them, but like 10% of all the Kindle books on Amazon are self-published romance. Mm-hmm. So it's a huge market share of both self-publishing, but also Amazon itself. But dark fantasy romance has exploded over the last 3-4 months and has really taken over the dark fantasy genre. It's a real bad time to write dark fantasy with no romance elements. But if you're writing romance, it's got even less big publisher interference than basic romance. You track that and the number of big publishers that are doing it to kind of see how much indies have a chance. And romance has a really low number of that to begin with, but dark fantasy romance is even lower than that, which is always what I'm looking for in romance. If you're going to write romance, don't write in a romance genre that has a higher publisher interference than the standard one. But if you're not writing romance, the 2 other things I like, sword and sorcery, which is a subgenre It's a weird one to trying to define, but if you can get one that fits in there, that's one that's been growing exponentially for a year. Really, I've been tracking it for a year and been high on it since the beginning. And then the other one I like just for kind of the ease of writing. So it can be a very comfortable genre to write in. It's not a big money maker, but it's got a very long tail as far as where you can make money and how steady you can make money, which is cozy mysteries.
Yes.
Which are fun to write. They have the kind of right kind of formulaicness to make them easy to complete, but there's a lot of room for creativity in the characters and the crimes to really engage you. And they're just a really steady seller. They had a bit of a heyday and have come back to the pack, but they didn't. They just came back to where they were chugging along fine before.
Right.
So those are my three genre tips.
Yeah, it's interesting that you point out the traditional publishing interference aspect of things. And last week, in fact, we had Mal Cooper on the podcast, and one of the things that came up was just that I think it was a statistic that since 2016, more books have been written and published than in the entire history of humanity prior to that. And just that going forward, if you're writing a book and publishing it, however you're publishing it, really, you now have to stand out from the crowd. And I think to connect at this point, if you can find a genre or niche where there is less traditional publishing interference, you have a better chance, I guess I would say.
Yeah. It's a balance in everything, because you're also looking at what you're trying to accomplish and what your chances of it are. Are you looking to make steady money? Are you looking for a big splash? Are you looking for the possibility of huge money? And what are you willing to give up to do that? And what are you able to do? You mentioned Becca's Syme. I thought she said Syme.
I think Syme, yeah.
Becca Syme. Saw her speak a couple of years ago. It was very inspiring, talking about the different paths to success and how many of them there are and the differences in them. Because, we want to talk about writing the market today. I mean, there's no easy way to self-publishing success, but there are simpler ways. And probably the simplest way is to write a lot of books and write them to market. Write quickly, write short if the market can take it, and write to market. But the fact is, not everyone can do that. It's not easiest. I call it fire hosing. Not everyone can fire hose out a book every 2 weeks, every month, continually. Not everyone can do it. If you can't do it, there's no shame in it, and doesn't mean you can't succeed, but you have to do it another way, and you have to not feel bad about the fact that you can't write fast. I can improve anybody's writing speed. There are ways to do that, but there's everyone has their own kind of rev governor that they're going to hit a hard stop at some point. Writing is a muscle, and the more you work it out. But if you're a 125 flyweight writer, you can be the top of the flyweights and be the absolute champion, and maybe that's 1,000 words a day. And if you're a heavyweight, you've got a higher cap. It's just it's how we're built.
Thank you for watching. Check out these other videos from BookFunnel, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.